Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the newest album from ScHoolboy Q called CrasH Talk. Oh, I had a bad feeling about this one. And oh dear God, that sinking feeling of dread in your gut when you've got every expectation the album you're about to hear is going to be nowhere close to as good as it should be, that's among some of the worst possible experiences you can have as a critic. Now, don't get me wrong, there were albums that dropped on April 26th that were bad or disappointments, no way around it, but it's not like I expected quality out of AJR. Hell, for them, if they somehow managed to get worse, that'd be at least fascinating in an excruciating sort of way. Don't worry, that review's on its way. But with ScHoolboy Q, look, I know it's been years since Habits and Contradictions, which I still hold as a fantastic album. I know he's in a different place as an MC than when he made Oxymoron or even Blank Face LP, an album that so many people loved and that I like despite some of its messiness. I know that he was shaken pretty badly by the deaths of Mac Miller and Nipsey Hussle, and I was expecting some of that to creep onto this album given how often it was delayed. And I know that for as much as critics like to place TDE on a pedestal, that it's shakier in 2019 across the board than it even was 3 or 4 years ago, even if nobody wants to admit it. And with the singles rolled out for CrasH Talk and that features list, look, I'm not going to deny, I was worried. I'm not going to dance around this. Even with the acknowledgement that of the crew, ScHoolboy Q has always been willing to dive into flashier, mainstream accessible tendencies. And hey, if your expectations are in free fall, maybe you can only go up from there, so alright, screw it. What do we get from CrasH Talk? Oh boy. I can see CrasH Talk being a bit of a divisive album, and I'll be honest, across my first 2 or 3 listens in, I was convinced that it was a messy, disjointed, frequently underwhelming album, and easily the worst project that ScHoolboy Q has ever released. And about half dozen listens later, look, I'm not about to retract many of my criticisms, but I will say I kind of understand what ScHoolboy Q was trying to do with CrasH Talk a little bit better, and that understanding of his mindset, a comfort and somewhat stability in his lane, juxtaposed with an unanswered feeling of depression, survivor's guilt, and a desperate desire to project and prevent anyone else from seeing any sort of vulnerability, it does make the progression of this album make sense. I can certainly respect what ScHoolboy Q was looking to do with this album. I just wish I liked it. I mean, it's okay, but it's far from great, and honestly, it's barely even good. Now, granted, some of that might be rooted in how much ScHoolboy Q just sounds outside of his comfort zone in the West Coast groovy tones and slick melodic vibes in his production that made him seem so distinctive, both within TDE and outside of it. Now, that's not saying that he can't do this let-in, actively discordant trap sound justice, you know, that with every single badly tuned piano and guitar chord, it was picked to sound as sickly and fractured as possible. It's intentionally designed to make you and I feel uncomfortable, and thus I'm kinda torn on whether it's an indictment of how much of mainstream trap could fall into this lane unintentionally for this sort of subversion too easily, or I'm just giving ScHoolboy Q way too much credit and he just picked a bad bunch of trap melodies that just happen to be popular right now. And what's kind of exasperating is that when you look at some of his guest appearances, it's clear that they aren't really on his wavelength to get introspective or provide much worth caring about at all. They could very well represent that shallow commercial pivot. I mean, Travis Scott's already been lambasted for Chopsticks, which is not a good song, but it's not a total failure either. I kind of like ScHoolboy's flow on that song, but it's not like Water featuring Lil Baby doesn't also fall in that territory, and I'd be inclined to put Lies with Ty Dolla $ign and YG and Floating with 21 Savage in that category too. And it's not even so much of the content as it is the lack of groove or flow that makes this album so discomforting. ScHoolboy Q's production team has always given them some weird, swampy melodies that might not always be on key, especially in recent years, but when the bass beats are these overweight trap clunkers and the hooks have stripped away the melody in favor of this blunt repetition, it's obvious they do not play to his strengths, especially when you're more familiar with his back catalog. And the only reason I'm inclined to give him a pass at all is that I can tell it's intentional and he's trying to throw his audience off balance. It's one of the reasons why so many of the songs feel so abortive, fragments that flow into the next song before he can truly hit rock bottom. But you know what, if it's his version of deflection and coping is just making the same mind-numbing bangers as everyone else, just with worse sequencing. And let me stress this, the sequencing of this album where the songs are not designed to flow into each other, it is pretty bad. Look, just because I understand it doesn't mean I have to like it. I will say it again. And you know what? There are 3 big reasons why even I'm still not entirely on board with how the bangers might mean more than they do in the context of the album. The first being that the larger commercial audience won't give a shit one way or the other, because they sure as hell aren't looking for that deeper album context. It might not even be informed here. It's more subtext than outright text. And why would they? Because, my second point, it's rare that the content of these songs highlights that there would be greater connective tissue. I mean, when Kendrick Lamar leaned into his commercial side on Damn, many individual songs implied more going on in a way that a lot of CrasH talk just doesn't, especially when some of the guests will chime in. And to the third point, even within the project, I would struggle to say the album keeps a consistent tone in its discordance. This isn't Danny Brown pulling us into a kaleidoscopic nightmare of all shapes and sizes on Atrocity Exhibition. A song like Chopsticks with its cheap watery layering, or that fragmented attempt at elegance on Water, or the brighter West Coast bounce on Lies with a big hook from Ty Dolla $ign, it just doesn't seem like it would fit within the more fragmented, discordant vibe of the project, which with every CrasH talk take seems to imply that ScHoolboy Q is struggling to assemble a cohesive statement before everything just hits the wall again. Or in cases like Floating, the lack of any deeper lyrical subversion just doesn't match the ugly piano line. The song just doesn't work for me. But if I'm being brutally honest, there's not many tunes that were chosen here that I think work well even in the right context. Num Num Juice might go hard as hell, and I think it works better within the context of the album, but it's still way too short to hit as hard as it could. Similar case for the off-key, choppy guitars of Dangerous with Kid Cudi, and the wheeling keyboard tones cutting through Black Folk. It leave me feeling that there should be more to these mixes. Not the first time I'm just feeling a little bit of these songs are underproduced, or at the very least undercooked. Hell, for as hard as 5200 goes, in between its cadence, the beeping melody, and the wiry vocal layering, it's not hard to see this is coming from the cutting room floor of the Black Panther soundtrack last year, or more specifically, a retread of what was already done better on X. And yet here's the thing. I get why these moments of relative normalcy in the mainstream, I get why they're here. And the sharp juxtaposition between them and the moments where ScHoolboy Q has to take a breath and snatch a moment of vulnerability, it does give this project some okay moments. I appreciate how the oily keys of Gang Gang collides with the West Coast boom bap of Tales, or he reminisces how he could have taken a less criminal path. He had the grades for it, but he didn't do it. And now he sees the depths to which he's been pulled and all the death around him. It's one reason why the shattered pianos and attempted hookup to mutually ease such each other's pain on with Black, it works on Drunk. And how Black Folk tries to center the chase for money but shows the monotony in trying to sustain it in the industry, which forces him to dumb down his content and distrust the people around him. Hell, it's very possible to see Dangerous as an overdose moment, wherein seeing friends either fly away to either greater success or to whatever goes on next, leaving him just stuck floating in a forgotten cloud of weed smoke and pills. I get why it's depressive, and it's no surprise why we get CrasH Talk Take 3 right after it. But you know what? It's in the final third that I think ScHoolboy Q is probably the most consistent, discounting Water. First with CrasH, as he broods on being left behind and seeing too many people around them shorten their time on Earth, whereas given how he's got a daughter, the responsibility forces him to find some sort of peace of mind and stability, even if it comes from the golf course of all places. And with Attention, well, it's not exactly a safe note to end things on, as it shows both the acclaim he's received now and the respect from his peers, but just how easily he could have been taken in by the trap and how that legacy of trauma could have lingered for him. It's not so much coping, but just soldiering on. A very grim note, but one that shows him kind of steering into the skid, with no need for a CrasH Talk Take 4. But again, I said near the beginning of this review that this album would be divisive, but it's one that I get why he made, and if there's a project that illustrates the muddy stop-and-start nature of coping with trauma while still wringing out some measure of commercial success to keep going, it probably would be this. And this has prompted some critics to draw a parallel with Snoop Dogg setting into his underwhelming comfort zone, but I'd argue this project is inexact, and it doesn't quite give this enough credit in its fragmented, emotionally scattered, and almost desperate approach to reconcile reconciling grief, I'm reminded a little bit more of Earl Sweatshirt's Some Rap Songs, although this replaces the jazz rap abstraction with trap bangers, and I'm not sure it's better for it. Because again, while I think I grasp what this album was trying to do, I don't think I like it. Individual songs, they feel undercooked. ScHoolboy Q always seems like on the cusp of really showing something revealing and truly heartfelt, and then never does. And while he's competent outside of his comfort zone, I gotta be honest, there's more flubbed rhymes and flows than I can truly excuse from him here either, especially with as good of an MC as I know he could be. And given how little desire I have to revisit this, yeah, strong 5 out of 10, and I think if you're coming as a fan of more of his lyrical material, as I am, you're probably going to wind up disappointed. Otherwise, not precisely bad, but he's absolutely done better. But I hope this is something that ScHoolboy Q just need to get out of his system. Yeah, I hope if it is out, it's truly out for the better, and I'm hoping he's in a better place for whatever might come next. Let's just hope that's soon. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know this is going to piss some people off. I really don't care at this point. I've heard his better albums. He's capable of better than this. And while I get what he was trying to do, I understand it. Doesn't mean I have to like it. But hey, if you want to buy or stream the album, links down there below. And I got the poll up there. I'm curious what you guys fall on this, because this one could go in any which way. I know some people really don't like it, but I know some people have gotten on board with this, so go figure. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And hey, if you guys want to check out the last episode of Billboard Breakdown, I keep seeing people in the comments not knowing where it is. I got the poll right. I actually got it's on a new channel. It's up right over there. Please go and subscribe. Check it out. The episodes are still coming out as regular. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time. Hustle for a job day.